Welcome back to another episode of Cinema Pursuit. This time, Vikash is still in India as we're recording. So we are hijacking the pod and we are doing our own podcast episode on this feed. So I have my wife here, Kat, with me. Say hello.
Hello, I'm here. I decided that I'm a fair substitute.
That's right. Much cuter one.
Hey.
So we'll be tackling the movie Bad Education. So there's quite a few films with the title Bad Education. So when you're looking, you're probably like, oh, is it one of these TV shows? Is this like that? I think there was a comedy movie with Cameron Diaz at one point that might have been called Bad Education.
Bad teacher?
This is Bad Teacher, whatever. What? See what I mean? This is so for anybody who's asking, this is the 2019 ish, and I'll explain why later why it's an ish, but the 2019 ish film that was released on HBO directly. I don't even think it went into theaters. So, Bad Education, Cat. Why are we doing this movie?
Well, this is like, as we said off the pod, this is like the trifecta. This is one of our big movies that we keep circling back to. Somehow, Bad Education became like a cornerstone for us. So, of course, we had to touch on it at some point.
Yeah, when you talk about the trifecta, for those who haven't listened to some of the older podcasts or don't know outside of me and Kat, there's like three movies that we both watched together for the first time that instantly became both of our favorite movies. It's like shared custody for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually done the other two on the pod already. One was Phantom Thread, and then one was Inside, which we did for Kat's birthday movie. And those are two movies we watched for the first time, and we both instantly fell in love with the movie. Bad Education's the third one, that trifecta of movies where we both watched it on our couch. I believe it was early into COVID,
I think
in
it was,
2020.
yeah, like early 2020 because I
I
was
need to
still,
go look
yeah,
though.
I was in college and I was taking my fraud class, which was first semester 2020.
Yeah, and so we sat down and we watched this for the first time on a whim. I think it was just because I saw it had Hugh Jackman, who I like, and it had something to do with fraud and accounting, which I knew that was Cat's bag, and that was about all we knew. And it wasn't a movie that was widely broadcasted, why it got a lot of publicity, and I'll get into why later on with how the rollout of that happened. But um, this was something that we really love. So, what are your kind of initial thoughts on this movie, Kat?
So when I went to type up my outline, I really had a lot to say about this whole why did we even pick this movie? Why is this movie like so good, not just for us, but for me? And when we go back to when we watched it, we were on our couch in our apartment, bottle of wine, having a great time, enjoying the early days of 2020, not knowing what the heck's going on. And I was working on my accounting degree, and it was such a fun experience because every time I saw something related to fraud, once I immediately picked up on it being a fraud movie, I don't think you told me that it was a movie about embezzlement. You were just like, we're going to put this on.
I always try to tell you the least amount as possible when I put a movie on because in my head, knowing almost nothing going into a movie is the ideal state.
Mm-hmm.
And so since I'm usually the one that's picking the movie, I have to know a little about it, but you don't. So I always just try to be like, let me just quickly click on this before Kat gets a chance to even read the summary.
Yeah, half
I
the
know
time I
she'll
don't
like
know what
it.
you're putting
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and I like that because I'm like, I know she'll like it, but I want her to be surprised as much as possible. So I'm going to not tell her what we're about to watch at all.
It worked out
This
really
was one of those
well.
cases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was perfect for this one because we were just hanging out. I think it was like a Friday night or something, and I had us continuously pausing the movie so I could go on tangents about how they were committing fraud and how garbage they were at doing it, and if you're gonna be doing it, do it right. And
Yeah.
I was taking my fraud class at that time where we talk about like audit. Maybe it was an audit class, but I just only remember the fraud from it because that was the interesting stuff. But we were talking about how fraud happens, the things you do in practice to prevent it and whatnot. Um, but those tangents and that whole experience was just so fun. And I think it just really cemented this movie as just a great experience and a great movie, on top of the fact that it just objectively is a fantastic film.
Yeah, I always come back to this movie is it's a real genuine character study.
Yes.
Like this is the type like what the director's trying to figure out here, and I think this is what drew them to it. I haven't read anything on that, but in my opinion, this is what it drove me towards this type of story is that what type of person dedicates their career to education and yet so willingly lies and manipulates for their own gain. It's kind of like those two ideas are at odds with each other in this movie, which is fascinating. And clearly, the director had that same fascination because when they portray Hugh Jackman's character Frank in this movie, it's a very layered portrayal. It's not it'd be very easy to treat this in a way and another it's a great performance, but it would be easy to treat this like Wolf of Wall Street where you really don't show any redeemable qualities in the main character as someone who is defrauding people and is not a good guy.
Absolutely.
Um, but what the director decides to do instead is really just to show the whole picture, the good and bad, and the ins and outs of this guy. And I really respect that because that's not an easy task. And it's rare that you find a movie that does this so well, the character study aspect, without someone trying to just resort to, I'm going to clearly show you this guy's bad or clearly show you this guy's good. Instead, they're just going to kind of show you what encompasses this person. And he's not a good person, but there's more than that to it.
Yeah, my favorite things about film is when they really dive into the gray area of a character because people are not good or bad. We are all in that gray area. We all do good and we all do bad. And being able to create someone so relatable and so human on the screen, I don't have to agree with what he's doing. I can say, hey, he's doing something wrong. But I can kind of see that there's more to him than this illegal, fraudulent activity. He's stealing money from a school system. It's wild to think about people being more than just that one bad thing, but that's the reality of it. Everyone always just wants to look at the one good or the one big bad, and that's not the case. So when we see that on the big screen and they do it right, they do it in a way where they succeed in truly showing that there's more to this character, even if you don't touch on everything. I find it really impactful as a viewer and also just as a person who loves to see when you can get the layers in art and it's portrayed right. It's a success all around when you get that.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a tendency to make your characters two dimensional.
Mhm.
When you go into a movie and maybe you have an idea, is I want to portray this idea. And the fastest way to get from A to B to portraying that idea is to have my characters also portray that idea. Sometimes it directs you to have more 2D characters. You're like, I want this guy to be clearly representative of this and he's going to be bad. And this guy is going to be representative of this and he's going to be good. But life doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that good people will sometimes have certain things to them that make them problematic, and bad people like Frank, who I would say is not a good person from this movie, the character,
Mhm.
but there are certain parts about him that are good. There are parts, he's not defrauding people at some random business. He's defrauding people, but after he's worked to get to the point of superintendent. And it doesn't seem like, based on what the movie's portraying, that it's not like he wanted to get to superintendent so then he could defraud the district and make money.
No.
It seems like he worked really hard to get to that position and then realized he could also defraud the district while he's also making it the number four school in the nation. So that just the ideas of those two things converging and trying to go through the pieces and figure out is what is this character, and it's more than just good and bad. Who is this person? That is hard to do in a movie, and it's the type of movies, like you said, we both really like.
Yes.
I'm thinking of like some examples, like Paul Thomas Anderson always does this really well. There Will Be Blood,
Yep.
The Master, the that Adam Sandler one where he's very neurotic that I'm forgetting at the moment.
Not
But
eventually.
anyways,
Yeah.
certain directors are really good at this, and this director Cory Finley, who also did Thoroughbreds,
Oh, good
that's
movie.
also a pretty heavy character study in a lot of ways. So what I'm just trying to say is certain directors seem more acclimated to wanting to have their characters be three-dimensional, and this director is excellent at doing that in the few movies of his that we've seen so far.
Yeah, what I really like about Frank specifically is that you can absolutely see the positives in him. He doesn't have to be an all around good person for you to still recognize that he's good at stuff. He's a fantastic educator. And like I
Yeah.
said, I'll have to touch on that later, but like that's one of the wonderful layers you see in this film. And I really just thoroughly enjoy that you can see it not just in his character, but the others as well. But, he's the main character. You're going to see more of him with it. And it's I don't want to say it's hard to find films like this, but I feel like we don't find something that's at this quality very often.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and it's one of those hard things to where quality films are made often, but not all of them are ones that end up catching on. You have to go hunting for them,
Mhm.
and but also films that seem to really be beyond genericism, where you want to do a biopic. There's a lot of ways this story could be written and performed that would have been more generic. That's not what they did here. That's not
Mhm.
what he wanted to do here, and it reaches that next level of quality that we always look for. I think me and you have a pretty good eye for quality.
Yes.
Vikash does as well, where we can kind of see a movie and you can tell which movies were kind of churned out in a system where maybe it was a kind of a group of people making decisions. Maybe it was a director who
Mhm.
didn't have the power to actually decide what was going to be made, and studio heads had more. You see that a lot with some of these Netflix made films.
Yeah.
Not all of them, obviously,
Yeah,
but
of
some of
course.
them. And you see this with a lot with the any Disney produced films, where it's like a committee has a lot of say into what actually is in the final cut. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, and so those movies end up looking generic. The power of cinema is that there's 100 people working together to put one person's vision into play. And the
Yep.
thing about art is, at the end of the day, all this is getting into auteur theory, and Vikash is going to hit me upside the head when he's back from India, because we both don't fully agree with it. But what I do agree with it in is that the singular vision of an artist is more powerful than a committee trying to make decisions around
Yeah.
what's being shown.
I would agree because when you think about it, you're getting a diluted view. If you have too many it's too many cooks in the kitchen. It's
Yeah.
too many opinions diluting the original thought and inspiration. And other people's impact on the main objective is good, but sometimes a committee is not the going to produce the best quality, most interesting work.
No, and it's interesting because we're getting kind of
Yeah,
off
we
topic.
are.
No, but it's interesting because with television, it's the opposite, right? Usually it is a committee
Yeah.
for a lot of these that are writing, and it doesn't seem to affect it in a way that it affects it when movies are made by committee. Most television shows have a writer's room.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad had a writer's room. All the great sitcoms like Parks and Rec,
Mm,
The Office had a writer's room. I think True Detective season one actually was a single writer, which was significant because that's rare for television.
yeah.
But for the most part, it's a writer's room. So it's not like a writer's room can't work. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that when studio heads feel like not non-creatives,
Yeah.
which is kind of a dirty word, but when
I know what you
non-creatives
mean.
start putting their input into the creative process is when things fall apart.
Yeah.
So I don't know the process behind this movie, but it feels like there was a singular vision, and I think that kind of narrows down what we want to find in film. It's like, does this film have a vision? I rather a film take a big swing and a miss than to not take a swing at just try to bunt it and get to first base.
Yep.
And this movie was clearly trying to do something, and it ended up working. And even if it didn't work, I would still commend it because it's trying to do something more than just a standard biopic.
Yeah. 100%.
I tied it back in.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. We did
Do
it.
you have any other thoughts before we start talking about some action is the juice?
Well, I just wanted to say that part of why I love this film is also like personally, I felt very validated by this film. I'm
So,
not an educator, but I'm an accountant. And when I was in college, I think this was around the time when I was really trying to narrow down which pathway I wanted to pursue for my career. Because college shoves tax and audit down your throat. They act like that's the only option, and that's not the case at all. But when looking into my options and in considering them, I just wanted to feel like I was still making the right choice with my career in general, that accounting was the right path for me. And watching this film made me feel like I did pick the right path for me. And that just kind of like helped me grow such love for this film on top of just it being a great movie altogether. So yeah, I feel like that just helps with the memory of it. And the first time we watched it was probably my favorite time we watched it ever.
Yeah, no, because well, and going back to what we said earlier, when you
Yeah.
watch a movie that you know nothing about, everything's a surprise, and this movie takes a number of twists and turns, and in a lot of ways is a journalism movie, but instead of
Yes.
watching it through the journalist point of view, you're really going through the antagonist slash main character
Yep.
point of view, So you're right. Certain movies get better every time you watch it, but this is a movie that was amazing the first time we watched
It
it and
just
has
stayed.
held that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stayed. That's the other way, right? If you have a favorite movie, either it's at least for me, it's either one that I watched and every time has gotten better till it reached a point that it's in that, like, Mount Rushmore for me of great movies,
Mhm.
like this one is, or I watched it, immediately it was already near the top, and then I had to watch it just a few more times just to make sure I wasn't
You weren't
you know,
um
just feeling real good that
yeah.
day or something, and then I watched it a few more times and it's like, yep, still there. Okay. It doesn't get better than this. I agree with you. That first time we watched it, it was very much like expecting a standard biopic and then just getting so much more out of it, which was
Knocked
what
it
was
out of the
miraculous
park.
about it.
Good job, Zachary. Good job 2020
I know.
Zachary.
I wish I could go back and figure out what led me to watching it, but more than likely, so this is always my key barometer if I'm going to watch something I didn't really plan to watch, and I'll share this with everybody because I feel like this is the key, okay? When people because this is also what led me to watching Breaking Bad and what led me to watching, Fleabag as well.
Love
When
Fleabag.
people on Twitter who are not typically movie or film people that you follow start talking a lot about a certain show or movie, to me, that's a good indicator that something special is happening. Everything Everywhere All at Once was like this
Oh,
too.
yeah.
When it gets out of that circle of people who watch movies and film for a living and tweet about it and gets to the people who maybe tweet about a film or movie like once every year or two or don't, it's not their thing. That always just to me says, okay, this is what we need to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened to me with Bad Education because otherwise I would have not even known how to look for it because of just how it didn't get a theater release. It was considered a TV movie. Like most people don't know this movie exists. Like they really did not do a good job putting it out there.
Oh, yeah. When I was talking to my mom on the phone yesterday and I told her we were recording, she's like, "Oh, what movie?" I'm like, "Bad Education." She's like, "What?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "You'll really appreciate it, honestly. You'll like it. Here's the cast. Here's the base rundown that is like the short shtick of it." So hopefully my mom watches it. Kathleen, you better be watching this before listening.
Yeah, between this and the other movie, Three Idiots, that we have coming out soon, I like to say sometimes we do one for us and then do one for them. And this time it's going to be two for us.
Yeah.
Realistically, that's fine. I rather just people watch if they're interested. Okay, anything else on this before we move on?
No, that's pretty much it.
I'm not going to even try to do an impression of how Vikash does
Don't
these
don't try.
categories. He's the master at it. I'm just the apprentice here.
He's got
Um,
the energy. He's got the
I
juice.
yeah, I do, and I don't.
Oh, we
I
shoulda
should have him
recorded
call
him.
in.
Yeah,
It's
oh,
like
we
what,
should
5 a.m.
yeah.
in India.
Wake
I
him
should
up.
have been like, Vikash, call in and just do these categories real quick. Action is the juice. Kat, what are the most juice scenes of this movie? What was the scene that stood out to you and said, this demands to be talked about?
Okay, so I know we're gonna overlap on one, so I wrote 2.
Okay.
So I'll just
I
go
we
with the
will.
overlap because
Okay.
it's a given. So
Yeah.
there's the club montage.
Hmm.
And we love this scene. We were talking about it while watching the movie and afterwards, and I'm like, well, it's a given. This is going to be the one I talk about. But what I really like and what I'm sure you like is that we finally get to see Frank lose himself and not be performative anymore, or at least for a moment, for just a blip in time, he gets to be himself, and we as the audience get to see that. And I wrote a lot about this scene because it's actually super layered. And this is where Hugh's just so good at his performance. Like, he can show such a layered character in just a scene where he doesn't even talk. And in this scene, he takes a minute to get there with some help from his boyfriend, but he loses himself in the moment at the club. And once he finally lets himself go, he's accepting what's coming and he looks for a split second just truly happy. I mean, he does this silly little twirl on the dance floor and just has this nice little giggle going on. That's something you see when someone's heart is light and just for a moment full of joy. The music resonates with the character and the story, and as an audience member watching, you feel part of the scene. The camera work, it's nothing crazy, but the camera just going around them while at the club with everything going on, and it is a montage. So then you get some other clips in
Yeah.
there. I think it just is the perfect recipe for the climax of the film. And that's what this is. It's the climax.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk
There's
about
a
here,
lot.
and yes, this
I
is
didn't
not
say
I didn't even bother to write another one. I have an idea of another one, but I have a feeling it's probably gonna overlap with you as well, but we'll see. But this is the one I wrote down, and I kinda had a lot of the same thoughts
Yeah,
you
go for
did,
it.
to where this is the best scene from top to bottom. I don't know if my Google search for history is maybe just, like, basing it off of old history, but when I typed in "bad education movie," the next thing that popped up as the top suggestion was dance scene.
Yep.
So, clearly, other people have tried to rewatch this scene on YouTube or somewhere else because it's very memorable and very like powerful. So I like a few different things they do here. One of the things is that the coloring is a lot different than the rest of the
Yeah.
movie. Being in this club, it's less professional. Like everywhere else they show in the movie is this drab gray school. Everybody knows that kind of school look where it's like an office but older, you know? It's just
Yeah.
everything's a little old.
Fluorescent
Everything's
lights.
kind of yeah, everything's very gray and boring, and that's most of where the movie takes place. I mean, there's a couple beautiful houses, but otherwise, that's it. And you finally get to the scene where it's like the lights are on. It's a different atmosphere where it allows Frank to hit the dance floor and start letting himself unwind. The way that the camera, like you said, follows him, the camera is so interested in Frank during this scene.
Yeah.
It just stays on him, follows him, circles him. It is so interested in watching him let his guard down and actually show himself for the first time. That's really significant. And then it's overlaid with his life falling apart. You know, you see the cuts to the other scenes of people getting arrested. This is like the standard kind of montage that happens at the end of like investigative movies like this, but it being overlaid with this very powerful scene of him being himself for the first time is really, really powerful. One of the songs that's in the scene, or the main song
Yep.
that cuts on "In This World" by Moby, it adds another layer of sadness because really, I looked up the lyrics to the song. The only thing it says, for the most part, is just keeps repeating the words, "Lord, don't leave me all by myself."
Mhm. No,
And
100% it
pro-
resonates with that too.
yeah, from a character perspective, that's like the really I know there's a scene after that where he gets arrested, but that's really the last note of Frank's character, you
Mhm.
know? You know, he's very vain, but
He's a
I
person.
also don't get the feeling he's full of himself, you know? The amount of makeup he does, you know, some
He
sort
gets
of
some sort
like
of
a
plastic surgery.
that's not someone who's confident in themselves who does that. You know, there's a level of, you know, I don't even know,
He's
self-esteem. There's
he's
probably
got some
something there.
self-criticism going on.
Yeah. And, you know, because somebody who doesn't have that is himself, and he's clearly always trying to figure out what's the right thing to say to the crowd, right? You see all the scenes of him memorizing the parents and what they do so he can talk to them. Like everything's a performance for him, and someone who's comfortable in their own skin doesn't do that.
No.
So clearly, Frank is not comfortable. And the other thing I wanted to add too, because there was so much going on in that scene, I really love scenes where someone's fully aware that the end is coming and they get to have like one bombastic moment of
Yeah.
happiness about with someone they truly care about, because Frank isn't a good person, but the movie builds that complexity of his character so well that you really actually feel for him in the scene, trying to hold on to the last real part of himself before the walls close in. It's sad that he finally gets a chance to be himself only when his world is about to collapse. And you know, a lot of movies would not have included that part. You could have ended the movie with him in the driveway getting arrested.
Yeah.
But by making the last memory of him really be that dance scene right before it, you really build a last attempt at empathy for him, as
Mhm.
his life did not have to go this way. You
And,
know?
in the scene right before this, he shows up at the house that him and his boyfriend bought, and he tells him that he quit his job, hopped on a plane, and that he's there. He's not going back. He lied
Yeah.
to a degree. Did he quit his job? I'm sure he walked out of those doors, and technically he thinks he did it on his own terms to a degree, but the concept is he left that, and he's running away from the fate that he knows is inevitable, but he just wanted to have a moment of real connection with someone he cares for. And this is that moment. This is that scene where he's getting his last, I don't want to say last hurrah, but his last moment of
Mhm.
joy and peace before everything crumbles down. And the montage, would you like to hear the list of scenes we see?
Yeah, sure, go
So
for it.
in the montage, we see that first long clip. It's about 2 minutes or so at the club where Frank's being pulled out on the dance floor and finally, starts to dance and like let himself go a little bit. We see Pam driving to her house and going and turning in the incriminating documents she has on other people, probably saved in case she could use it for blackmail if needed or use it for a plea deal eventually.
Well, what'd you say last night? That if you're gonna do fraud, you gotta keep
You
the
always
receipts?
have to keep receipts. You gotta, if you're gonna commit fraud, and I will not advocate for fraud. I am an ethical accountant. If you're gonna commit fraud, you gotta keep some receipts on not just your actions, but other people's
Well,
actions.
and think about it too, the, what is it, FBI agent or
Yep.
whatever, when he basically said, "Hey, maybe there's a way to save your family,"
Mhm.
it's like he knew as an accountant, he probably just done enough of this stuff to know that she was keeping the receipts, like
Absolutely.
you said, if you're gonna do the fraud, you probably are keeping
You're
them
keeping
somewhere.
them either for
Um,
potential blackmail,
yeah,
not assuming that she initially wanted to do blackmail, but you gotta have something in your back pocket to dish out if needed, or for a potential plea deal like this situation here where she turned in the documentation to help her family. But, she turns all that in, and you can see on her face, she knows what's coming. She does not look pleased by
yeah,
what she did, but she's just kind of accepted the fate. You see her niece get arrested down in the utilities
yeah.
in the
Uh,
basement.
Love the accent on her niece in the movie. Just
Yeah,
great Long Island, just
stereotypical.
accent, yeah,
Great job. Great job.
mhm.
The auditor gets arrested, and he
He's so funny,
he's so
man.
freaking stupid, man. That auditor needs his CPA certification revoked, and he needs to never be allowed to
I like that they
practice
show
again.
that because it would have been unrealistic if there was no auditor
Yeah,
around. Clearly, he's a guy. I mean, it makes sense that this could happen when there's an auditor who's just been at a school and it's just like, or he does all the schools and it's
yep,
just like, oh, it's no big deal. He's like, I'll take her word for it. He's probably got 8 schools or whatever he's got to run around to.
yep,
He's probably like, I don't have time for all this.
correct.
Okay, you're good. I trust you,
Yeah,
which is not what an auditor is supposed to do, but it's realistic. It could happen.
if you are working as an auditor and your and your client is successfully committing fraud, especially to this degree, millions of dollars over several years, like I think it said 4 to 12 years. Yeah. You're getting arrested because you
Yeah.
didn't do your freaking job. So we see him get arrested, and then afterwards the final beat in the montage is another clip at the club where Frank is looking at his boyfriend, memorizing his features. You can see it on his face. He's accepted what's about to happen, and he grabs his boyfriend's face and just memorizes it cuz he knows it's going to be the last time he really sees him and sees him happy like this. And he wants to remember
Hmm.
it. Like that's so human when you know something bad might happen and you just want to make sure you memorize every bit of the person you love. But he knows the end is coming, and then the music from the montage ends the moment he parks the car and turns it off, and you start to hear the sirens.
Yeah.
Cue the arrest scene.
Good.
It's a
I
great
really do.
montage.
I love a good arrest scene,
Me
man.
too.
I feel like it's really telling in that moment where the sirens come on. Like, I feel like that's your chance to give the character one more time to, like, it doesn't matter at that point. They can just say whatever they want. It's like almost like someone's dying words.
Correct.
The way he basically just says, "Hey, I'm not a good person.
You
thirty
don't want
thousand
me.
dollars in the drawer. You can make that last, a year if you're careful. You know, sorry, I've been lying to you."
Yep.
Essentially, he is self. Again, this is where I kind of think he has some self-esteem issues or
Yep.
something. Is that I think he's aware he's not a good person, and I think most of the stuff he says in the movie, even the thing about him, with the bagel, oh, it was a 60 cents bagel
Yeah.
and no one mattered and it, tumbled into fraud. I think all that stuff's bullcrap that he's trying to use to try to continue to put himself in a good light. But I think the only time he's real there is at the end where he says, yeah, I'm not a good person.
Yep.
and sorry, good luck,
Yep. You get
you know?
about 4 minutes of him, and that includes the montage, like, other shots.
Yeah,
You get about 4 minutes of Frank being honest with
yeah.
himself and with at least one other person, and it's sad. It's a sad moment. Like, it's not that you're hoping he doesn't get arrested, but you're recognizing that there's some emotion there. And I really love how this is the climax of the film and there's still 20 minutes left of the movie. It's just so well done. And you're right. Anytime that you know an arrest scene is happening and the moment you hear the police start showing up, they can say whatever. And I'm going to take that as last words because that's almost either the biggest bullshit or the most honest they will ever be.
Yeah, there's so much more I wanna say about this, but what's your other scene? What else do you have? Because there's more scenes that worth talking about in this movie as well.
Well, it's a pair.
Okay,
It's a comparison.
okay.
It's the Chad scenes.
Is that the kid?
Yep.
Okay,
So
the little kid
he's
who
a
has
little kid.
trouble with class and his mom wants him
His mom
to,
wants him to get into
be
the
put into a higher placement.
correct.
Yes. I've been thinking about that scene a lot, and so I'm interested what you have to say. Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
the Chad scenes, it's two parts. There's one scene at the beginning of the film and one towards the end. At the beginning of the film, we see Frank meeting with Chad's mom and Chad. And I can't remember her name right now.
Well, I think it was Carol.
Carol, because he
Yeah.
because he says it in that last scene.
Yeah.
But when he goes in, the mom is mad about how a teacher isn't letting her kid take bathroom breaks during an exam and is making excuses that the teacher is playing favorites. Which, if you know educators, more likely than not, that's not happening. A
Yeah.
majority of teachers do not behave that way. Teachers want kids to succeed, so okay. And this mom's just clearly worried. I mean, she's genuinely concerned about her kid not being able to get into this special program. And she seems to be spiraling a little bit because she's like, no one's listening to me. And she doesn't feel heard or validated. And Frank, he calmly says that they will allow her son to retake the exam with ample bathroom time if that's a real concern. And he addresses it and she relaxes and she's like, "Oh my god, okay, thank you. Thank you so much." But he doesn't stop there. He goes over to Chad and relates to the child specifically because when you're an educator, your job is to take care of the kids, not the parents. So when you're a superintendent, you have to handle the quote politics of it by addressing the parents and the other adults in the room. But at the heart of it, if you're an educator, you're going to circle back to the children. And when he goes over to Chad, he tells him that it's okay that he's behind. And when he was his age, he struggled with his times tables, but eventually he caught up. And then he made a joke about how he sets the math curriculum and gave the kid a high five. And I just love that because when Frank is interacting with kids throughout this whole film, he is always so kind and considerate and compassionate with the children. And there's going to be a layer there where he's performing, of course, as I said before, he's been very performative. But part of that performance is for the child. It's not to perceive have other people perceive him a certain way. It's for the child's benefit. And I love this because then at the end of the movie, I think about half an hour or so before, you see him interact with Chad and Carol again. And this is when the feds are investigating the office, and he's like freaking out, running to his personal office, closing the door, and they're already there. He's like, "Hey, listen to my child read this letter for you." And while Frank's clearly ruffled and distressed, Chad starts reading off his letter to ask for flexibility to get into this program. And we pointed it out when watching the movie that when Chad struggles to pronounce accelerated, his mom has him start from the beginning. But Frank says, no, go back to that trouble sentence. It's a very specific phrase,
Yeah.
and it was entirely on purpose, as scripts are, but that's an educator phrase.
Yeah.
That is what you use when teaching. Helps the kid learn how to pronounce the word. He's clearly still not doing well.
Yeah, with the FBI investigating him, though, he does take the time to do
He
this.
takes the time, and he goes through this really weird way of teaching the child by taking a kid out of the context of the letter and giving the race car example. And the moment the kid can pronounce the word, he looks genuinely proud of Chad. He's like, yes, good. And the moment he gets 2 seconds before the mom's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, you know what? I'm about to go to jail anyway. You're the problem. You only care about your kid like a racehorse. You parents compete your children rather than prioritize their education. And that's how I know at the heart of it all, he might not be a great person, but he is a good educator because he prioritizes the children and their education. And he can recognize, like a lot of educators, lots of teachers, people that work in these education fields, they are real heroes because it's a thankless job. People might remember their teachers when they're adults from when they're kids, but they only remember a few, and you don't ever reach out to them again in the future. So like they're like, I remember all my students, but you might not remember your teachers. And that's the difference here is I care, and unfortunately you don't, not in the same level.
Yeah.
And I love
Yeah,
it. These scenes
so
really pair well together, and they show that balance. They show him performing for the mom and him still teaching the child,
mhm.
but no longer performing for the mom. And I love it. It's so beautifully done.
Yeah, those 2 scenes, especially the second one
Yep.
in my head, I have a very negative reading of Carol in those scenes, and I've thought about it more today, and it's become more negative because part of me was, like, willing to say, "Okay, yeah, it is a little weird how he taught him the word accelerate was pretty aggressive,"
Yeah.
and I think any adult would be able to pick up on that where maybe a kid wouldn't, so I get that,
Sure.
but that he is right. The one thing that I don't think we talked about when we watched it last night was that what is Carol trying to do with her son? She is trying to get him into an advanced class, yet
Her
he.
kid isn't.
I think it was some sort of reading or comprehension or literature class. It had something to do with English,
Yeah.
but the thing is, he couldn't. Look at how much he struggled to read the letter his mom clearly wrote for
Yep.
him. Clearly, the kid didn't know how to read it because he didn't write it. He would know how to read it if he wrote it. So this is something she wrote for him to gather sympathy, like you said, like a racehorse.
Yep.
And, so then her kid actually is not ready for that type of
No.
class. But in her head, because her kid is not making it there like she thinks it should, it's the educator's fault.
Yep.
I think he's very much right in that scene in terms of, you know, part of the problem with the school of he gets it to number 4, but think about the type of parents who are sending their kids to these top high schools in the nation.
Yep.
Pretty competitive. They're worried about their children's well-being, but from an educational perspective, not from um a well-being perspective.
Yeah. You don't wanna
And
push your child into a program that they are not prepared for, they don't have the skills for. They will fall behind, and that's not what the teachers want. Teachers want to build kids up the best way they can, and some kids have strengths in other areas or need different learning techniques or just take more time.
there,
And that's the disconnect with parents is they don't think about that. They just think about
yeah,
their kid
there,
getting into the program.
There's some real class criticism in this movie. Ray Romano's character, you notice when he's talking, and one of the first thing he talks about is all that he shows that really crappy looking PowerPoint, that didn't need to be a bar graph, but it's a very common, thing to just be like, I'm gonna throw it on a bar graph. It looks good.
Yeah.
But anyways, the first thing talking about is the colleges their students are going to get in and how many got
Mhm.
accepted into colleges this year,
Early
because
acceptance.
that's really what the parents are concerned about at these type of schools, is that my kid can get into the best colleges. Because think about it, all kind of pairs into each other. They're in affluent neighborhoods. The neighborhoods are expensive partially because of how nice the schools are, and the people in those expensive neighborhoods, when you're in that sort of level of class, how do you separate yourself from other people who make a lot of money that live near you? Well, your kid goes to a better college than them,
Yep.
so like he says, it's a racehorse thing. So where they're just more concerned about how it appears their children are being successful. So that scene, I'm glad they have that scene, because there's not actually a lot said on education in this movie verbally. A lot of this movie is more focused on the fraud and the character study.
Mhm.
But that scene is a good time to take a break from that and just be like, "Hey, by the way, can I tell you about how our education system it doesn't make sense, and how more specifically parents seem to be more concerned about their kids' success on paper than to actually where they should be in school
Yep.
and how they should learn. Instead, they just want to be successful no matter what. And if they're not successful, then it's the teacher's fault." She didn't even blink when the superintendent, when he said he's superintendent and he struggled in math. She didn't even blink. In her head, that doesn't make sense. In her head, if you got to be successful in school or you're never going to be successful in life, which is not true at all.
No. It's one of those things where I say this about workplaces as well, where a boss will not see an employee as a person, but as a role. This is something I've noticed as a adult in the workforce.
Yeah.
It's something people will see on a day to day if they think about it, but it's that same concept. The parents are seeing the kid as the position of child in education and not Chad. Like, they're not seeing
Yeah.
the kid as themselves, and they're viewing them as an asset, and it's not what you should be doing. And I'm not a parent. I'm a person, and I care about people, so I think it's okay for me to touch on that, right? I feel like a little dirty
Yeah.
talking about kids' education when I don't have one, but I have younger
I mean,
siblings
you
that
were a
I was
kid
a
and you
kid,
went through and you were
and I was
educated and you have
educated. Mhm.
realistically, the education of children is still going to affect people without kids. It's why we all have to pay taxes,
Yeah.
because the future of society and frankly the future of our lives depends on kids being educated.
Yep.
So
It
it's part of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uneducated generation of children will, produce a, you know, education of children that has more trouble in society.
It's
So yeah, it benefits everybody.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things where, like, I feel people need to think through a different lens when it comes to the education of kids in general, and I mean, their kid too. Just worry about your kids' ability to learn and them getting the education they need that fits them. If they need an IEP, get them the IEP. Make sure the kids have the tools they need to succeed, and don't push them into programs that look good on a college application when they're not ready for it. That's how you cause them to fail. I know I'm just kind of spiraling around it, but yeah, I really appreciate that this kind of puts it right on the nose. They hit the nail on the head and say, actually do better as a society in this movie. And it's a nice little message because we don't get a lot of education angle on this outside of it taking place in a school and in a school system.
Yeah, I think there's some critiques on the maybe upper class education system, but I
Mhm.
don't think that's the frame or focus of
No,
this movie at the end of the day. So it taking a moment to
touch on it.
give him that speech, to give him a chance to kind of let that part out, I think was notable. But I also, for sure, it's not the frame of the movie. Sure.
Mhm.
Production value. Cat, what is the most impressive piece of this film?
So I feel like I'm really bad at this because every time I'm like, oh, the whole movie's great. Like, it takes a lot of like thinking for me to really pin down what specifically I want to touch on. But I think what I decided for this is that I really love the little details in how they handle the character's appearance and how the cast performs the roles because they do it in such a real and believable way. Um, and it just kind of helps heighten the concept of the movie, the character study and such. I mean, Frank cares about his appearance. We know he's got lots of suits. He's always clean. We see him doing his makeup and plucking some hairs and just freshening up before he has his superintendent like school district meeting at the beginning of the film. And even at the end, we see him putting some, I feel like it was cinnamon, but he puts some spice and some lotion and he puts it on as little makeup just to freshen up. It really kind of nails it with how he cares about his appearance. Pam is super confident and cocky, and it
Mhm.
feeds into how her character behaves. And when she's making the margarita at the party, is she's just like interrupting her niece's request, where her niece is super nervous about asking her
Yeah.
aunt to help pay for something. She's she makes the margarita and she looks at her niece like, "Oh, sorry, just 1 second. You know how this is." She's so full of herself. And it really feeds into like she caused her own downfall there, which kind of helped cause the rest of it with Frank's assistance at the beginning. But I just really love these little details in the character design that just bring the film to a new level, you know?
Yeah. And that's kinda actually where my production value went,
We're too much of
where
the same.
well, in a yeah. So, to me, the set design and costume choices, specifically of how they represent a wealth disparity in the movie,
Yep.
was unsurprising to me, actually, given that the director's previous film to this was Thoroughbreds, which definitely tackled some of those vibes
Yeah.
of the kind of middle class broke aesthetic is what I would call kind of Rachel's house with her dad,
Yep.
all the way down to the frozen pizza for dinner, where it's clearly someone who at one point had money, currently still has the place, but maybe doesn't really have the money. So, you see him, he has this nice stuff, but they're sitting there eating frozen pizza. And that's a deliberate choice. I eat frozen pizza all the
Absolutely.
time, but it being in the film is a deliberate choice. Pam
Shitty
having,
looking frozen pizza. It looks like the
no,
cheap knockoff ones.
Pam having the house and a car that's way too nice for someone who works in the education system is a big,
Yep.
a big show of wealth, and also, like you said, a show of her cockiness about the ability to get this wealth. Frank's
Mhm.
apartment with his husband and the house he buys for Kyle again kind of add to that. And then you can contrast that to the school, which supposedly is the number 4 school in the nation, is pretty drab still and has like leaking ceilings and doesn't look like what you would expect how nice a school of that stature would look, or
Yep.
that
All this
that
money still needs
level would look.
repairs.
It just adds that layer of class criticism to the movie, where at some point I start to wonder if Frank's biggest crime in the movie, in the eyes of the filmmakers, was not the embezzlement, but instead was that the fact he was a class traitor.
Yep.
So he was so vain that he wanted to steal from the community to be as rich as a lot of the members of the community are. Because at the end of the day, and this is kind of part of Frank's speech, but even though it's not said, there's an expectation, unfortunately, from the public that the people who work in education should be broke. And they may not say that.
Mhm.
It's an act of service. No one becomes an educator to be wealthy. I think the filmmaker saying part of Frank's crime that the community saw it as so bad is that he stole from them to be as rich as they are, that he does all this for them, but at the end of the day, they still don't believe he should be as wealthy as they are, because that's not his role. His role is to get their kids educated into good colleges. He's not supposed to be rich. And the fact that he stole from them to be rich just like them, even though what he does for the education system is probably way more ethical than anything they do. That's the real crime here for the community, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
not the stealing, it's the fact that he was it's almost like he was trying to be a part of an upper class that he was not supposed to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, he participates in book club. He interacts with the community partially so then, he can be successful in his
Mhm.
role. I mean, it's networking at that
Yeah.
point. They make it clear at the beginning the budget
Yeah.
vote is something that they need to make sure they have people on their side and advocating for the school system. But he's interacting with that community regularly and he's participating in it. So I guess in his eyes, why shouldn't he be able to truly live in that part of it?
Yeah.
Why should he have to be less than?
Yeah, it's very thoughtful, and with the history of this director, you know that all of these choices
Intention.
were done purposely, which,
Yep.
you know, is how good directors work. So, do you have anything for production value left before we move on to dialogues?
I mean, they just did a really good job with it all, and every
Yeah.
time they did, like, a B-roll of, like, N Long Island, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, "Ah, yes, the classic, like, Northern New England aesthetic,
Yeah. Well,
everything's so nice."
you know what it reminds me a bit? It reminds me a little bit about how in a movie like Moneyball, you have to try to
Mhm.
make all these scenes of him just being in like offices at the
Yep,
athletics complex make it like interesting. And this
yep.
movie's having to do a similar thing where, frankly, when movies are shot in schools, usually they're some of the most uninteresting looking movies. It's usually a bunch of lockers, it's usually classrooms, they all look the same. It's hard to make that compelling filmmaking, and they were able to do so. So, yeah, great job by you, man. Um, okay, so moving on. Dialogues. Kat, what is your favorite portion of dialogue in this movie?
It's only a puff piece if you let it be a puff piece.
Nice.
Frank created his own downfall, and he
Yeah,
said it at the beginning in the most inspirational way. He was supporting a student. He was doing the thing that comes naturally to him as an educator and uplifting his student. He recognized Rachel. He said, "Ah, yeah, I had your brother. How's he doing in college?" He gives the quote for her piece, and then he encourages her to really make something real out of this opportunity. And he inspires her, and he does a great job. And unfortunately, it ruins his life.
yeah. There's two things there. One, it adds the complexity to him as a character, where she comes in and he's very happy to give her this advice, and it's good
Mhm.
advice. And on the other hand, there's the arrogance there too, of where he's not worried at all about the fact that a student would ever be able to figure this out. Realistically, who would
Yeah.
expect a student would be able to figure all this
No.
out? So there's a little bit of both at play there. Yeah,
Probably
that's a
didn't think about it
no.
because it might not even it's gonna be a little arrogance there, but it's also like, "Oh, yeah, we're working on this new project." He was probably like,
Yeah,
"Oh, yeah, maybe she'll go interview students and, like,
yeah.
interview staff and stuff
No,
like
for
that."
sure, for sure.
Encourage her that way. But
Yeah,
I it's just so we called it the moment he said it, we're like, "That's it." Because he inspired his own downfall, and the film took place over 1 school year, 9 months, because at the beginning of the film, they say the budget meeting or the budget vote is in 9 months, and then the budget vote happens at the end. And in 9 months, we see all this go down, and I love it. I love it. Just this one line, domino effect, butterfly effect, whichever one you like, that's what happened.
yeah. No, for sure. And the real what is she called in this movie? Rachel. I think her real name's actually Rebecca, the one that inspired this movie. But I believe
Yeah.
that she is a real actual news journalist somewhere. I saw, the last time I looked at it was a couple years ago.
Mhm.
So I don't want to incorrectly say where she's at, but I believe she did take this on to being like a real career, which is really, really interesting considering that, how many people, I mean, how many students ever have been able to write something this, significant that, we struggle to find real journalists now who are willing to do this level of depth of writing and research. So,
Well, when we were watching the film,
yeah.
you were like, she can be a journalist, she can be an auditor." I'm like, "Hell yeah, she can be an
Yeah,
auditor.
right. She can be an
I'd like to
auditor
see
too.
her. I'd like to
Um,
see her working around in my industry."
so, so is that everything you have for dialogue? Could I,
I figured I'd
yeah.
let you take the show
Okay.
from here.
So, yeah, my dialogue, I'm going to go ahead and read the quote that Frank says to Carol in their second meeting that we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yep.
Okay. He says, my problem is you. Carol, it's the people who trot their poor children out like racehorses at Belmont, who derive some perverse joy out of treating us like low level service reps. I mean, do you remember the teachers who sat with you, who held you by the hand, who taught you how to add and subtract, or showed you Gatsby, Solinger, or For the First, Mockingbird even? Do their names escape you? Are their faces a blur? You listen to me. You don't want to see us as people because that is not convenient for you. You just leave us behind at will. Never think of us again. You might forget, but we don't. We never forget. Ever. This is a really, really pertinent quote that has continued to stay at the top of my mind. There has been, and maybe this has been going on longer than I can remember, but I've noticed this a lot in the last, I don't know, 10 plus years, that there's been almost a vilification of teachers happening in America. And this movie really hits it on the head, where there's this idea that if you are a educational professional and the child is failing, it is your fault that they are failing, and it is also your job to teach them everything. It's not the parent's job to teach them anything anymore at home. It's up to the teacher, and if the teacher doesn't do it, then the teacher was bad. And like,
Yeah.
especially what he says here, treating us like low level service reps, having the gall that you can just, every time you have an issue, go to the teacher and complain about how they're doing your kid wrong in this way or that way, and not just trusting these people who've dedicated their career and lives to education, that maybe they know a little bit more than you about education. That arrogance is something that we've seen frequently in American culture now with people and their kids in school. It's that my kid is special and never does anything wrong, and you don't know what you're doing as an educator, and I know better. That it's sad. That's the
That's the
most I'm willing to
reality.
dive into it today. It makes me very sad, and it's not good
Yeah.
for the future. There's going to be kids who are good at school, and there's going to be kids who aren't good at school, and there's also going to be good and bad teachers. So not all of them are perfect, but the shift in view from educators or people who deserve to be celebrated to educators are indoctrinating your kids. If you really think like that, you need to reassess your belief system, because that's not what's happening in America. That's not what's happening anywhere. Like,
Mm-mm.
teachers here are trying to do their best for your kids. They don't get paid shit. They go into the profession so then they can help the next generation, and it's a calling. It's not a job, it's a calling. And this him letting out that frustration is, if you talk to any teacher in America, they would probably have the same exact frustration and would agree with Frank's words there.
Yeah, it's really sad that uh, there's never going to be a perfect teacher and mistakes are going to be had, but it's really upsetting and it's a shame that parents don't view teachers as part of the team because you're supposed to be working together to ensure that the child is able to flourish and learn and grow and be a wonderful addition to the society. And the fact that people just blame teachers for being bad rather than saying, I wonder if maybe my child struggled here for one reason or another. Let's talk and discuss what struggle areas my child has so then we can try to curve that and help them do better. But no, if a kid can't learn math or can't pronounce a word, it's the teacher's fault. And it's
And
upsetting.
it is.
And I hate it. I don't want to go too deep into it because it's just going to be
No.
us circling the drain on it, but it really is upsetting to see in this time and day and
Yeah.
all that.
Last thing I'll say, and I'll tie it back to the movie, but this
Yeah,
just
go
kind of
for it.
reinforces the idea that I was trying to get at earlier, is that in the eyes of the parents, Frank should never have access to this amount of money. He should be poor, because in their eyes, what he does for their kids is just gets them to the next stop, college.
It's sad because it's become a thing where people that are under that umbrella of a public or civil servant are not considered valuable or important or meaningful when they are. And it's just really sad. And specifically with education, because that's this film, you see that through the parents, they care about their kids getting into schools and great colleges, and realtors care about the property values being high, and people aren't really appreciating the real foundation of it all being a good education.
Think of how much of it comes back to money in this movie. When Frank convinces them not to report the fraud, how does it actually tie all the way back? How does he finally get them to back down? He ties it back to property value, money,
Money.
money.
Yeah,
So
he
at the end of the day, the board's compromised too. Like, the board's not good people. One, they went along with this and then threw him under the bus once it became too much. And then
Mhm.
two, they, at the end of the day, are concerned about the property value. They're not even concerned about the kid. They're concerned that their property in the city continues to be worth a lot of money. And
Yeah.
if that doesn't tell you what the director is trying to say with this movie about class and about the thought process behind what education is actually valuable, then I don't know how to help you. Like, there's clear indications here of what motivates everybody, and none of these people who are working at the school that they show in the movie are clearly good people. I'm not talking about the teachers, but I'm talking about these
No,
administrators they're
the
showing.
yeah, the admin.
There's clear, I mean, if anything, there's at least some nobleness to what Hugh's trying to do here that maybe some of these other board members, like Ray Romano's character, actually doesn't really have
No.
when, they're really put under the gun.
Yeah, Frank isn't a great guy, but he genuinely cares about his students. And that's the thing that I just keep coming back to when I watch this movie and think about it. And with the whole Chad scene, like, he is an educator and he cares about the children. It's great that he has a like top 4 school. It's wonderful that he's, created this flourishing community. But the root of it all is that every truly like wonderful moment he has is almost entirely just based around giving the children a space to learn. And
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah.
And it's sad that he's the only person essentially that cares. Pam doesn't even care. But Pam blows off Rachel when Rachel's asking questions, and Pam's also like, "Why are you asking for records?" So, that's part of it. But
Yeah.
Pam also doesn't give a crap. She's like, "You know what? You're just a kid. I don't
Yeah,
care."
and she's clearly someone who's not there for the students. That is,
No.
there is a difference there, that you see the difference in how Frank addresses the student and Pam. I have a lot more. I don't see the complexity in Pam as much, just because I really do
Mhm.
not feel like she's a good person as they portray her in this
No.
movie.
Mm.
Like, I feel like there's less redeemability in her character at that rate.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep
Yeah,
ranting at this
yeah.
point.
So for the Layla, what do you have for it, Kat?
The Club, that
Yeah, In
song.
the World
That's
by
it.
Moby. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
It's a great song. I could
yeah.
not remember the name of it,
I had to
after we
look it
watched the
up.
movie,
Yeah,
and I was like, "I just wanna add it to my playlist."
I kinda do too.
It's great vibes. I
I
love it.
yeah, I mean, I think we kinda already talked about what the song
Yeah.
meant, so I don't really wanna dive into that again, but it just, I think there's something to be said about getting a song with the right amount emotionality for the moment. They
Mm.
play White Flag at the end, which is, I think, like 2005, which is close enough to when this movie would have came out. So it hit
Yeah.
the right era. And, it's a song that I remember and I liked, but also thought it was a little corny. But at the end of this movie, it just pops on. I'm just like, perfect. Done. Like, 5 stars. Sometimes I think it's almost more important in these type of scenes, the club scene especially, it's almost
Mhm.
less important what's being said in the song and more important that the song has the right tone and beat to it
Yeah.
that matches the moment. Like, it's like a score in that way where, the words are
Yes.
cool to have, and it's cool the words in it match a lot of what the scene's trying to do, but really what matters is, does this song have the right tone to the movie? To the scene in the
100%.
movie. You haven't seen it, but After Sun has a scene like that, a dance scene, and they use Under Pressure by Queen. And it's one of the few times I've seen Under Pressure used in a movie, and I've actually been happy that it's being used. It's like, sometimes it's less about what the song's trying to say, and it's more about, does the beat and tone of the song work?
Yeah, and you know what? The fact that the lyrics work in
Yeah.
that scene, just perfect. Love
Yeah.
it. We touched on it. We don't need to
Yeah.
we
We
don't
don't
need
need
to
to
dig
keep
too
going.
hard. But
Um,
yeah, love it. Great,
yeah.
Layla.
Yeah.
Did you have a
Exactly.
different one?
No, that's that I
Okay,
had
I
yeah, I had the
figured.
same one. That's why I wanted to bring up the credits too, because I was like, it's all good. I think I
Yeah,
forgot what the trailer had, but the trailer had a pretty good song on it too that I don't think ended up in the movie. I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
don't remember.
This is, anybody listening, Vikash is great because he does all the research, and I'm just like,
Hanging out.
I just kind of I do my outline and then I go into it. I don't like to do a ton of research into the movie. Okay, so Kat, let me see if I can do my best Vikash impersonation. You know who should
Okay,
have been in this movie?
that's pretty good. I give it
Thank
like a 3.5
Okay,
out
wait,
of
let me
5.
do it one more time. I'm gonna breathe in, take
Okay,
a deep breath like he did. You know who should have been in this movie?
there you go. That's about 4.5 out of 5. Yeah, there you go.
Recast a role. Who would you have recasted in this movie if given the choice, Kat?
I would only recast one person, nobody else. Everyone's great, and the only reason I'm doing a recast is because I think she could do it. I think Pam could be
Mhm.
played by Jean Smart from Hacks.
Yeah,
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Did
Yep.
you have Jean
No, I
Smart?
don't have her
Oh,
down,
thank
but,
God.
like, I'm just like, you say that, and it's like, yeah.
I
There's
was
no
thinking
no
about
question.
it. I was like, "You know what? Pam would probably be a good person I could recast." She's I don't wanna say two-dimensional, but she's easy enough to flip between actresses, and I'm like, "You know who can do that, like, bitchy face real well?"
Hmm. Well, I think that's the and I think it's more of the writing and the character
Yeah,
than Allison Janney's performance, but I do wonder if Jean Smart could have pulled a little bit more of sympathy for the character out of that role,
I think
um,
so.
because
Well
she does that really well in Hacks,
mhm.
which is a very different type of show, but she does a really good job of giving empathy to a character who really doesn't ask for a lot of empathy or give you reasons to be
No.
empathetic. I mean, I love Jean Smart. I think that's a excellent choice for it.
Alright, who did you recast anybody?
Yeah. So, okay. Let me just say, when I do recast, there's two different reasons I do a recast. Either one, if there's a movie where genuinely I think that someone would have been better in it. A good example for a movie we've never done is West Side Story. If we were to do that, I would recast Angela Elgort before I even finished watching the movie because I think these were not good in it. But the other reason I do recast is if I think it would be really interesting to do the thought experiment to recast a role. So
Sure.
the reason I'm saying that is because I don't think anyone else could do the Frank role other than Hugh Jackman of any actor
No,
living today.
he's
I,
perfect.
I think the way he plays the role, I don't think there's one actor who could do it better. But I want to recast him because I think it's a
Okay.
fun thought experiment. So this is what the longest part of my outline was. I think I spent like 30 minutes researching different actors who I thought, and I know, okay, 30 minutes, whatever. You know, that's a
That's a
long
long
time to spend
time
on
for
one part.
you.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
long time to spend on one part where essentially I'm just doing a chicken scratch outline of all the other parts. So I went to a lot of different thoughts, and I'll just name a few just to kind of tell you where my brain was going. I thought about Ethan Hawke for a while, but there's still
Okay.
something a little too boyish about Ethan Hawke, even though he has a really good charisma. I thought about Ben Affleck for a while because he's very
Mhm.
charismatic. He could do maybe a little of that, New York thing, even though he's a Boston guy. But then I was like, there's just baggage with him when he's in a movie. It's sometimes you're just kind of suspecting him not to be good. It's hard to take, I don't know. I couldn't go with
Yeah.
it. So I looked at a few other people and I was like, I need someone who can command charisma and respect and also be able to do. I need someone who can do the accelerate scene and someone who can do the dance scene. Those are two different types of gears in an actor's resume.
Mhm.
So the guy I came up with, the one guy I could think who could also do this movie, Bradley Cooper is Frank.
I was gonna say, you freaking picked Bradley Cooper. That's why I put my hand over my mouth. I'm like, this man picked Bradley over
Let me just
here.
say, I mean, like, I'm an okay Bradley Cooper guy. He's not like my favorite actor, but he is good.
Yeah.
He's never just been my specific cup of tea as an
Oh,
actor.
it was
Make no
Maestro.
mistake.
You
The
got the energy from
No,
Maestro.
he's good in
Yeah.
Maestro, actually.
Yeah.
It's just like he's never been a guy that I'm like, I'm gonna watch this movie because Bradley Cooper's in it.
Sure,
But
sure.
I will
That's
make
funny.
no mistake, though, he is a superstar, and this is a superstar role.
Mhm.
So I looked at other people, like some more character actors, and I was like, they just
Sure.
can't do this. You need to be a
No.
superstar to do this role.
Yeah.
So if there was ever going to be a replacement, you need someone that same on-screen magnetism. So
Mhm.
Cooper can do the button-up parts. He can do the more frantic parts of the movie as well that very few actors can balance. Also, Leo could probably do this too, but I feel like at this point he's done this so many times in his career. Like Wolf of Wall Street's a good example, or
Yeah.
Catch Me If You Can is a good example. It's like I don't want to make him do that again.
No,
It
and
would
I
be
don't
too
think I could
expected.
have the same level of
The
empathy.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think Leo's great, but I don't think he commands empathy out of his roles, which is not a
No.
cut against him. It's just more of the type
No.
of actor he is.
I like that about a lot of his
Mhm.
work,
Yeah, he's really
but
good for roles where you want to not give empathy to the character.
I wanna hate his character
You
half
think
the
Django,
time.
for instance, yeah,
Yeah.
or Wolf of Wall Street, Killers of the Flower Moon, he's
Oh,
almost
I
better at
love that
he's
movie.
better at I like him in roles where he's trying to because think about Leo, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, but think about
No, that's
Leo.
fine.
He is probably one of the most charismatic actors of his generation. So when he takes roles where he's specifically trying to get you to not like him, it's like a challenge and it's fun
Mhm.
because you're like, this is Leonardo DiCaprio. I love Leo, but he's playing like a really charismatic racist, or he's playing this horribly uncharismatic guy who's poisoning his wife, like he's and it's not in a charismatic way like Phantom Thread,
No.
no, it's in a very uncharismatic way, right? That's the difference there. So Anyways, yeah, I think Bradley Cooper could have done a decent job with this, but no
I
one's
think he
doing
could
better
have.
than Hugh Jackman.
No.
There's most of Hugh Jackman roles, to be honest, I have trouble recasting because he's like a true one of one
So
in his
specific.
abilities. Another guy I thought about, and I kind of wanted to get your take on this because I don't think he's there yet, but I think he has the most Hugh Jackman energy of any current working actor.
Okay.
Andrew Garfield has a bit in him.
Yes!
Think of it. He has that kind of like stage actor kinda gravitas, and he's
Yeah.
done musicals. He kinda
Yeah.
has that thing where he can do serious, he can do more wacky, he can do more
Mhm.
angry. He has a really good filmography of working with really talented directors. In a
Yeah.
weird way, even though they're very different in terms of how they look and, like, the types of roles they pick, I
He could
think
do
Andrew
it.
Garfield is the most Hugh Jackman-y actor, and I'm sure that's gonna
Yeah.
be controversial, but I'm gonna cut this and put it on socials so then you guys can tell me how wrong I am,
Yell
but
at him.
it's an interesting thought experiment, like, Hugh Jackman's kind of a one-on-one, who's the most like him, though? And that's kinda I was just thought about that, I was like, "That's kinda
Uh,
interesting."
I love that. I love Andrew Garfield. He just gives me such wonderful vibes, and you're right, he very much, like, is in that same bucket as Hugh Jackman, like, it's oh,
The
good one,
versatility
good
here.
he is.
Go
Versatile,
watch this
he
and
gives
then
me
go
just
watch
great vibes.
watch Greatest
Yeah,
Showman and then go
yep,
watch, Logan, and then go
yep,
watch any of his other movies, honestly, Prestige or something. Like
yeah.
he really is a true actor. He really changes his roles.
Morph
He's a
Man.
chameleon, like in for
Yeah.
real.
I love that. I wonder if Andrew Garfield will eventually kind of follow the similar path as he gets older, where he gets some of these similar types of roles. I would love to see that. I
Yeah,
know roles aren't super common, but, something
that's
made
the missing piece is that Andrew Garfield's still too young for some of
he's still a
these
little young,
roles that
and
Hugh
he doesn't
gets.
have as much actual experience in some of these specific roles.
Yeah, these
Um,
specific I would now I'm having to
well,
look up
no.
Andrew Garfield's
Yeah, actually,
filmography because I feel like he's, like, in the last 5, 6 years, he's, like, really,
he's
like, been in
diversified a
some
decent
big ones.
amount.
Well, it wasn't that
Um,
long ago that he was kinda thought, maybe wasn't thought as this, like, great actor, but, I mean, recently, I mean, Tick
he's been
Tick
picking
Boom,
stuff up.
he got nominated for Tick Tick Boom. Under the Banner of Heaven did pretty good, that was a TV series. Hacksaw Ridge, that was 2016, but did really good. Silence was a really big Martin Scorsese movie that didn't do too well, but still, Eyes of Tammy Faye, like, he's been picking interesting roles ever since, I mean, he was in the Social Network, which was a big one for him too. So
Yeah,
really, I mean, I'm looking at his filmography. It's only like the last 10 plus years that he's really been popping
like
off, though. It's
yeah.
he still has a relatively young career, and
Mhm, he does.
he has a way to go for sure.
Forward to seeing more of what he does. As a branch from that is We Live in Time supposed to be good? Because I love Florence Pugh and I love Andrew Garfield, and so
That's a
I
good question.
I just keep listen, I keep seeing some of their interview stuff, and I just love how they vibe, and I'm like,
I
you
you
know
know,
oh my lord.
I
Okay,
just
sorry, I
kinda
need to
know
get off their IMDb.
yeah,
It had the trailer playing.
yeah, I was about to say, certain times I see what a movie's going to be about, and it's like, do I have the battery to watch this
Yeah,
very
the
probably gonna
bandwidth
be
for it.
sad movie? And it's like,
It's going to
maybe
make
some
me
point.
devastated, and I'm aware of it.
No, yeah, it's one of those, it's just like, okay, I gotta want
Yeah.
to be devastated, but
If socials tell me to
yeah.
watch it, I'll watch it. I
Yeah,
will
it
can
didn't pop
report
off as
back.
much as I thought it would.
I love Flo, and you
I feel bad for Florence Pugh, honestly, because, like, she had some bangers for a while, and I mean, she
she's
had one
good.
this year, she had Dune, and Oppenheimer, like, she's still doing well. It's just
Yeah.
it seems like she just has some really avoidable misses where it's like, the Black Widow stuff, she's got what is it, Thunderbolt or something
Hey, she's
coming.
printing money from that
No,
Marvel
I
stuff.
get it, you gotta get the
I
money.
get that Marvel money,
She's
man. If you can
better than
get it.
that. She's done Midsummer, she's done Little Woman, she's
Yeah.
done what's another one? Like I just said, Oppenheimer, Dune. Like she is in another
Mhm.
class of actress already, but she's
Yeah.
also really early in her career. So there's going to
She
be some
is.
roles that just don't work. No one,
Yeah.
no one for the most part ever bats 1,000. There's always going to
No,
be
no, no,
some kind
no.
of ones that just don't work. It's how
That's how it works. That's the recast a role bit,
yeah, that's
guys.
recasting a role, guys.
Kind
Yeah.
of conversation you get.
Okay. So soapbox cat. What's your soapbox rant monologue insight for us today?
So, you'll be getting a crash course lesson in accounting and why it is important to have separation of duties. Because this movie
Okay.
is a great example of how necessary it is. So, I'll explain what they are first for you. An organization will want to establish these things called internal controls within their finance department. And these are processes used to ensure the integrity of financial reporting and to ultimately prevent fraudulent activity.
Okay.
So, internal controls may vary. However, it is critical to have separation of duties within a finance department and within all processes, but finance specifically. And what is separation of duties? It is the principle that requires more than one person to complete a task. By having several people involved, you reduce the risk of fraudulent activity from occurring. So, if you are cutting checks, having one person handle checks from start to finish makes it more likely that they can get away with embezzlement than if you have more than one person. Let's say you have two people and one person can write the check, but a different person has to authorize it. They are now held accountable. If someone tries to do something fishy, there's another party involved. And the more complicated the process, the more people involved, and so on and so forth. But as we see here, this good and standard practice that we see in all organizations is not being held. And like Pam appears to be single handedly reviewing the financial spreadsheets with her one auditor that looks over the finances. He is either too overworked or too trusting of his client to not thoroughly review all the materials. And that's big shame on both of them. And there's other things in the movie, but these are the primary issues. If we had another person involved in the review of the financial activity, and then there wasn't just one auditor, but two, maybe three involved, you would not have had millions of dollars stolen from an organization. Staffing is always a concern with this type of thing, but generally speaking, these are necessary. This movie showed me, thankfully, early on before I started my career, how vital it is to have these controls in place. You can learn these things in the classroom and on the job, but I feel like this was a really good way to, like, within an hour and a half, 2 hours, tell me exactly why these are vital.
So I guess what you're saying is that this should have been avoidable because there were checks and balances here. It's just when
They
the
weren't
check isn't being done, and really a minimal amount of check and balances here. It
truly
seems like there's only three people who know about the purchase, or four people who know about the purchases in this department, and you would think out of four, someone would be willing to stand in the way, but the auditor wasn't doing his part.
correct.
Superintendent was in on it.
Correct.
The bookkeeper was in on it,
Mhm.
and then she hired her,
Her niece.
I guess her near niece.
Never hire your
No,
family.
no, so it really becomes a thing where it's like you think, okay, four people should be able to be a stopgap here, but
No.
if one of them's incompetent and the other three are in on it, you can easily slide something like this through.
Absolutely. And
Uh,
it's one of those things where, like, sitting here, you can have people in on it. I mean, with my example of two people handling checks, obviously you can have both people in on it. But I mean, that was just a
so,
surface level example of what an
wh-
internal control is. But in this film, the auditor in particular is extremely incompetent at his job because, like, I understand it's not easy being an auditor. I am an accountant. I work full time. My job is not always easy, but when that's the case, you cycle people in. You have to pass hands. What people do with audit in particular, even if you have the client and they are your primary client, you will have other people from your firm involved in review regularly, not just one auditor looking at the stuff. You will have other people in your firm looking at it too. And or the firm will rotate it between different people every so often. Organizations will change their external auditors every couple years, for example, to ensure that there is no influence. You have a fresh set of eyes every time, and your audit team will not be only one person. You'll typically see anywhere from 3 to 5 people from what I've seen. This ensures that sufficient work is being done, stuff doesn't get slipped through the cracks, whether you miss it on an honest human error or you're trusting because, you know, you have a relationship with them, you know them, blah, blah, blah. The auditor sucks at his job. I'm so happy he got arrested.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one, it's great they showed him doing it too, 'cause he clearly
He was
failed
incompetent.
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't there, like, certain things you're taught to look for when it comes to fraud, like certain signs? And I feel like you know some of these, but, like, people who refuse to let other people handle
Yes.
the books, seeing stuff falling apart
Yes.
while lots of money is being spent, like, not actually having too many other people have insight into
Yes.
these things, and
There's
yeah.
with separation of duties, there's other things, segregation of duties as well. So then different people are involved in different parts. You don't have one person handle all the finances. You split financial activity between at least a couple people. So then not everyone can handle the full process. The person that cuts the checks is not also the person that collects the checks. You have everything
Yeah.
separated, at least to a degree. Then all these checks are in place to ensure no mistakes are had or fraudulent activity goes on. But as an auditor, you're going to look for things physically, like the leaks. The school's got so much money, but they can't afford to get a repair. It's one thing if
Yeah.
you have to get like permissions and whatnot to do so. That's normal, but you're not able to start that process. Why are you not working on that? Um,
Yeah.
but also hiring your family is a red flag. Um, and and just let's see. I'm trying to think of some other big red flags. I wrote a bunch down. Let's see. All this money yet needs repairs. A lot of suits for a weekend.
Hmm.
Consulting a little on the side. In bold, family cannot be involved if you want to commit fraud, you noob.
Hmm.
When you're auditing someone, you need paper trails. You need documented support for every action. And if there is no documentation, you have to have an explanation and some sort of proof of that explanation. Like, hey, I lost this, but here's my credit card statement for this, or here's a photo of the piece that we purchased. Here's some attempt at contacting the organization to get a new receipt issued, etc. I'm not an auditor, but I did learn audit and I work with auditors. But this is entirely preventable. And
Yeah.
if the firm had done their job and rotated the work, then this would have been entirely preventable. And that's something that they taught us in school specifically is part of why firms will give such good vacation. A lot of firms will rotate with their vacation a bit, but you'll get like 3 weeks to start. It's to kind of encourage and almost force your staff to take leave so then someone else is reviewing what they look at. Like
Yeah.
that's entirely on purpose. So then you are not
Yeah.
the sole person responsible for your accounts. I think it's really important for people to know, not just finance bros and accountants and such, but people in general need to know that these things need to be in place in an organization, big organizations specifically. I understand, you're sole proprietor, you're not going to have this massive staff, but you're going to retain your documents. And if not, you could be audited by the IRS or
Okay.
something.
Okay. So I hope we didn't lose everybody for 10 minutes of accountant talk,
Sorry.
but
You're going to give
no,
me an
no,
accounting
actually
movie. I'm going to give you
very
accounting
interesting.
information.
No, I know, very interesting, and I knew that's where you were gonna go with it.
Yeah.
So thank you for Cat's accounting corner.
CAC.
I'm taking over and doing my soapbox
Go
now.
for it, baby.
And you know what? Vikash isn't here to disagree with me either, so this is a perfect time for me to do this. And I hope this doesn't contradict anything I said on the Logan pod. If it did, I should not be held responsible for anything I said more than a couple hours ago, honestly. So
Mhm.
sorry if this is contradicts anything I said there. But I firmly believe this is Hugh Jackman's best role. That's my soapbox here.
Me too.
Firmly believe this is better than his old cowboy role in Logan. This is better than the darkness of Prisoners. This is better than him blowing everyone off the screen in The Greatest Showman. This was the role of a lifetime for Hugh, and he delivered. I'd compare it to Leo, what he got to do in Wolf of Wall Street, and how that kind of felt like a once in a lifetime role for him because it tapped into his charisma in a way that the previous roles didn't fully tap into, I think. This is kind of what happens for Hugh there. He's here. He's had some other roles where being charismatic has been important, but not one with the same amount of depth, I feel like, as this role has had, where he's not only had to be charismatic, he's had to be buttoned up, but then he's had to be vulnerable, but then he's had to be explosive and loud, and then other times he's had to be sneaky. There's a lot of things he has to do in this part, and not only that, it's tied to education, and he was, I believe, a gym teacher at one point. So he has a career background in education
Yeah.
to where he understands the importance of what's being done there. So I think this is his best role of his career so far, and I would not be surprised if this ends up being the best role he ever has. This is Hugh's role. This is his defining career role to me. Not Wolverine, not Logan, not any of that other stuff
No.
that's more popular. I think this was the best role of his career.
I think so too. I strongly agree. And we rewatched Logan recently. Logan's great.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna open up my old notes while you're
Yeah.
talking to make
The
sure I didn't say that was the best one.
this man does a wonderful job. He's a great actor and performer. I'm always excited when I see him in a role, but this is my favorite one that he's had. And you're right, it's such a layered performance. He gets opportunities to do so many different types of acting in the film, but this level of character study he gets to work with,
Yeah,
it encourages him to do what he feels the character would want. I don't know how much directing was actually given versus his decision, but
yeah,
I feel like he resonates in this role really well, and the way he performs, it's my favorite, the best out of all these films, and it doesn't feel like he's performing for the camera. It feels like he is just being himself. And
y
that's what you want. You want a character to be the thing you see on the screen. You don't want to see an actor acting as a character.
yeah, no. I think this is also the type of role for Cory Finley, the director. When you write a role like this, no matter what happens with the rest of your career, you're going to have big actors interested
Yes.
because this is the type of role every great actor wants. And, in the next section, actually, this might be a good
Go for it.
transition to the Oscar section. I'll just jump into it. The Oscars. This movie was not nominated for any Oscars, actually. So,
Boo.
but here's the reason why. It's not the fault of even the Oscar voters. It's the fault of HBO. So when I said in the beginning this was a 2019-ish release, frankly, I had a hard time, and I probably just didn't find the right article, but I had a hard time figuring out the release date for this actuality because this was a film festival movie that I believe it was that was picked up by HBO, but then HBO slotted it as a TV movie, which
Boo.
doesn't make a lot of sense considering that, yes, HBO is a TV channel, but they changed the damn name to Max. It's a streaming service first at this point. So they bought the movie, but then they can slotted it as a TV movie because they believed that would give it a better chance to win awards because there's not a lot of competition in the TV movie area. So Hugh Jackman was not up as an option for Oscars. They did win some TV movie awards from different award giver outers
Sure.
more, but I don't, honestly, this whole segment's about to be about the Oscars, and it was not eligible. And when I looked at the awards it won some awards for 2020 and some awards for 2021, which tells me I'm not the only one who's had trouble with finding what the actual release date of this is. Do you consider it a 2019 or a 2020 movie? Because it won awards in both years.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they really screwed this one up, and I think when you think about the best actor performances from 2020 and 2021, he would have had a real shot to win one of those 2 years.
Yeah.
I even think I would need to go back and look, but I think when we did the Golden Pursuit Awards. Depends which year we did it. But when we do our own little talk and
Yeah.
podcast, he was either our choice or he
Yeah.
was our follow-up. I would have to go look. But we very much respect this role. And
He
the
did a
fact that
great
it was not even
job.
eligible for nomination is sad because this is one of those movies that more people should have saw about Hugh. It was really just a missed opportunity to give Hugh another chance to raise his stardom because he truly is one of our most underrated movie stars, like of his generation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I figure you don't have anything else on awards before
No,
I go to the
other
next
than
one.
give this
Yeah.
man some awards. I'll give him a freaking gold star sticker.
So legacies
Yeah.
through the prism of time for this movie. Is there anything that pops to your mind about the folks who made this movie, Kat?
They the people that came together to create this film created a masterpiece that I think will age well and will be viewed as timeless in a sense. You'll be able to watch this film again in 20 years, 30 years, and it'll still have the same, like, it'll still hit the same. It won't age poorly. It's based on an event that occurred in 2002. So it's already like 23 years old in theory with the set. So another 20 years, you ask, will it age well? I think it will. And then Hugh Jackman does a great job in the role altogether, as we've been saying.
Yeah.
I mean, the legacy right there.
Yeah. I mean, really the two things for me legacy-wise in this movie, for Hugh Jackman, is just this is like the epitome of his career. He's kind of been underlooked his whole career outside of the X-Men movies, but whenever he shows up in a movie, he can actually carry a big movie, which is a hard thing for most modern actors to do. He can actually carry a movie. This is the epitome of his career because he carries this movie. It's his best performance, and no one saw it. Which is just the Hugh Jackman
It's so
experience of,
sad.
and a lot of his movies have been seen, but it's just one of those things where I feel like he's just always been undervalued as an A-list dominant movie star. It's just he's never gotten his due in the way he should have. And then for the director, we did Thoroughbreds before this, which we both
Mhm.
saw and really liked, and Bad Education. And he's done a couple movies since then, but none of them have really been very successful. But he's got a really special lens in how he sees the world and how he makes his movies. And I hope he can get to that level again. I think he can. I think he's still got a lot of time. He's still got a lot of movies left to be made. But I mean, this movie and Thoroughbreds were very special and very different than a lot of movies that are the typical movies made in Hollywood. So, from a legacy perspective, I hope that this isn't the height of his career, but instead, this was just the precursor to bigger and better things that Cory Finley might be able to do. So,
I really hope so, because he's the way that these both of those films are made is just so different. And I would love to see more films kind of take that approach. And I'm not saying different like how Inside's different. I'm saying different like the way that you get the depth of a film. I love that. I don't see
yeah,
it.
it like reminds me of the guy who made Moneyball, where he made Moneyball and then he made that wrestling movie with Steve Carell, and then he didn't make anything else for a while, and he
Yeah.
was kind of look and say, "Man, there's a lot here. What's the barrier here? Is it just you can't get funding? Is it that you don't have a good idea?" Because clearly
Yeah.
there's something special about the way that you make movies, and I would love Ben Miller is who I'm thinking of. But it is clearly something special with how you make movies, and how can we get you back to doing this?
Yeah.
You don't have to do one every year, but like
Just a
give us
couple.
one at least every 5.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
I'll
Okay, MVP, Cat. Who put the team on their back for this movie?
I don't think it's that hard to make a selection here. I mean, Hugh Jackman does everything in the world. He does such a great job. He's a star. He carries the film. He's the one that has the in-depth character analysis, and he portrays such a complex situation and character in a way that you won't usually see. So, yeah, he's my MVP. Hugh baby, let's go.
Yeah, no, he's my MVP. This is one of the easiest MVPs I've had to do. I've never had a second thought here.
Yeah.
This movie from the beginning to the end, the camera is on him,
Mhm.
and he is in a lot of the scenes. And when he's not there, his presence is still felt there throughout the movie as someone that you have to be thinking of what his intentions are, what's his next moves, what's his, is he being fake here? Is he being real?
Mhm.
Um, it's a masterclass of performance, and it's a masterclass of character study, and it's one of the best lead performances, I think, in a film in the 21st century. I think this is
Absolutely.
a special, special performance and a very, very great movie.
I would like to give a little recognition to the one person, Rachel. Geraldine does a great job in the
Yeah,
Rachel role.
it does.
I mean, this cast, when you look at it, you start, like, noticing some people are like, "Oh, yeah, hey, I've seen them in some other stuff." But the Rachel role is important to the balance of this film, and we haven't even touched on Rachel at
Yeah.
all.
No, that's a good point. There's a few people in this movie that we really haven't touched on.
At least give an honorable
So
mention.
Allison Janney as Pam
Yep,
is very good. Her character is
fantastic.
maybe one that I don't get a lot of empathy for,
No.
but her performance is great.
Yes.
Yeah, Geraldine's her role as Rachel. She's actually started to take on more roles, and she's a very good young actress. She was recently in Drive Away Dolls.
Yeah,
Very good in that.
loved that.
Ray Romano, love when Ray Romano shows up in a movie.
Yeah.
He's a very empathetic character. Whenever you see him,
Mhm.
like as a person, you just see him show up, and immediately you want his character to succeed, and you're kind of interested in what their deal is.
Yeah.
There's some pretty good character actors in here that sometimes show up too. The auditor, Victor, who plays Doug.
Mhm.
Um, he shows up in Bridge of Spies. He shows up in Marvelous Miss Maisel. He's a character actor who'll show up in a lot of like TV and small movie parts. And I just wanted to call him out because his very weak role as the auditor is memorable, which
Very
is really
memorable.
what you want from a character actor.
Yeah. No, I think
So yeah,
everyone did their part very well. So, like, recognition across the board, but it's clear just from the fact that we've spent the last, what, like, 2 hours talking about Hugh Jackman's success in this performance that he gets our MVP.
yep. If that wasn't the answer, then we wouldn't have been doing this movie.
Yeah,
That's at the end of the day.
seriously.
Okay. So let's talk about our final thoughts for this movie then.
Mhm.
Is there a companion movie that you can think of that would pair well with Bad Education?
I don't have a film that's in the same light. If we wanna watch something under the same director that has another character analysis like that, Thoroughbreds is really good. If you wanna take something with a finance angle, I mean, The Big Short would be my first recommendation. It still
Yeah.
has great pacing, it's got a wonderful energy. You get such an interesting cast of characters with awesome actors, like, it's a stacked cast.
Similar
Like,
time period
similar
too.
time period. I was telling my
Yeah.
coworkers we were doing this movie, and I was like, "Yeah, have y'all seen, like, The Big Short and Wolf of Wall Street?" I'm like, "That those are the movies that I like and I think of wanting to watch after finishing Bad Education." And that conversation kind of fed into my companion movie list.
Yeah, so there's a few things I thought about when I was thinking of companion movies.
Yeah.
This doesn't really fit in with other high school movies.
No.
Other high school movies are usually focused on the kid,
Yep.
or if it is focused on the teacher, it's maybe something that's more of an inspirational thing, like a Dead Poet Society or a School of Rock.
Yep.
So I had to think, okay, let me not think of a school example.
Mhm.
Big Short's one I thought about, and I think that's a good example. What I landed on two that I think if you like this movie, you should watch these. And I'm not going to even include Logan in that, though. In the Logan episode, I did recommend Bad Education. Um,
Sure.
but I
That's fine.
assumed if you're interested in Bad Education, you probably saw Logan.
I'm
Um,
sure.
so I think Catch Me If You Can, the
Yes.
DiCaprio led,
I
Tom
love
Hanks,
that
also
movie.
led movie. It's a movie about fraud, impersonation,
Let's
but fraud.
go.
And it's also has a very strong lead performance,
Yes.
which in my mind, that's a bit of a character study as well. And in my mind, that's what this is. It's a very strong lead performance. It's a character study. And then as a bonus, if you love Hugh Jackman and you're like, man, what's something I've probably never seen from him? Go on YouTube and find his performance in Oklahoma on stage. It's when he's probably in his 20s when he did this. I would have to go look, but there's an old performance of him on the stage production of Oklahoma. And if you want to talk about star power, and you want to talk about it seeping through the screen, he is incredible presence on this stage performance of just a really silly American play. Oklahoma is a very silly play, but his performance in it is incredible and memorable, and it's something that just goes to show that he has the juice to do whatever he wants. You know, I almost recommended The Greatest Showman, even though I don't like the movie much,
Yeah.
because
He does a
that's
great
another one
job.
where okay, so that movie has Zendaya, has
Yep.
Zac Efron, and both of them are doing a lot of parts where they're having to do, sing songs and stuff. And when he sings songs with them too, I'm not trying to put them down, but he blows them off the screen. It's like
Absolutely.
watching rookies and watching professionals. He can do a musical, so he's got the chops for doing a
Yeah.
musical. And it goes back to him, the old days, him doing stuff like Oklahoma.
That's his
He knows how to belt his voice, how to project it, how to be in the right places, the right movements, the cadence. He's got it. And so I'm not the biggest musical guy. We've done La La Land, we've done some musicals,
I love
but
Wicked.
yeah, sure,
God, no.
sure. I'll watch a musical with him any day because
Yeah.
I know that he's one of our best musical actors who are not also like full-time Broadway people. I'm not adding in the people who actually are Broadway actors, but he's one of the best who have done it before and understand how to do it.
I wonder if Wicked had been earlier, would Hugh be a great fit for Fiero?
No, 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 yes, yes, but Hugh should have been the Wizard of Oz.
Oh my
Think of him. He
god.
can do that. If one guy can do the
Why did they not
cocky part
cast
and the
him
weak
as
part,
the Lord? Oh
because
my
it would have not been as
god.
fun. It would have not gotten many people to sit their butts in the seat. Let's be
Listen,
real.
Jeff Goldblum did a
And
great job.
Jeff Goldblum did Jeff
He
Goldblum.
did Jeff
Hugh
Goldblum.
Jackman would have done
The Wizard.
the Wizard of Oz. That's the thing. He would have done the Wizard. That would have been the difference. Like, think of it. He could have knocked the crap out of that.
Man, well, I was just thinking Fiero because he's got enough in him to be
Oh yeah.
Fiero, which is
Well,
a big
young
role.
Hugh Jackman did the heartthrob stuff,
I
but
was thinking
he could
about
do the
him being a cute
heartthrob.
little heartthrob.
He could do it. He definitely could do it.
Ah, they should have had
I
him as
think,
the wizard.
but
Mm.
yeah, he would have been a great wizard in
Hey,
that
Hugh,
movie.
can
I
you
mean,
just, like, sing a couple
oh, and yeah, he can
Wicked
sing.
songs? No, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Hugh. He ain't gonna
Okay.
listen to you, he's listening to me.
Did Jeff Goldblum have to sing in that
Yeah,
movie? I can't even remember. Okay.
yes, they're
Well, then they definitely should have got Hugh Jackman.
nerd at
And,
all.
let me before someone yells at me, he also was in Les Mis.
Oh,
So
yeah.
all these other ones he's in, I didn't say Les Mis once during this podcast. He is in Les Mis. So there you go.
Damn, last 2 minutes of the pod, you mentioned Les
Yeah.
Mis.
Yeah, by the way, he's also in probably the most popular, successful musical in like a
Movie
since
musical.
basically since Wicked, or both since before
Yeah, I
Wicked.
was gonna
So
say, baby, Wicked
that made
just
a lot of
dropped.
money and was very popular. I
Yeah,
remember.
Les Mis was big.
Yeah.
But yeah, this ain't a
Okay,
musical pod, so we're gonna keep moving.
Kat, thank you for joining us on the pod
Happy to
today.
be
It's been
here.
a while.
Yeah.
We're very happy to discuss this movie together, and it completes our little trifecta of movies that we share a very deep love for, that we saw together for the first time. So, do you have any final thoughts before we sign out here?
Anecdote. So, my little anecdote, after we watched this movie for the first time, I was several glasses of wine deep, and Zach was saying he was still rating his movies in IMDb at that time, and he's like, "Oh, I
Like a
kinda wanna
dinosaur.
I kinda wanna change the way I'm rating it." I think it was on, like, a 1 to 10 system rather than a 1 to 5 or
Yeah.
whatever. You're like, "I
Mhm.
kinda wanna change that. I wonder if there's a way I could do that." And I'm like, "I can figure it out." I exported the spreadsheet, I showed him how to adjust it and do all that stuff. I was showing off my little accounting skills, and I'm just, like, having a blast being a little validated accountant.
Yeah, something about IMDb and Letterboxd might be able to do this. I don't know, but you can download all your ratings as
Yeah,
an Excel file. So we did
good
that,
to
and she
know.
helped me kind of organize it so then I could go through. Because I had like a few hundred movies on there, and at the time it was like, man, there's probably 100 on them that I definitely don't agree with the rating anymore. So, and I was like, it's going to take too long to go through IMDb. So, anyways, that helped me. So thank you for that. It shows that I have been unfortunately um, way into rating movies for a long
Forever.
time.
You've been rating movies the entire time I've known you.
Since I was a junior in high school, I think.
Yeah, and we've
I
been
think that's
together
around when I
11
started it.
years, and
Used IMDb for most of it. I think I switched during COVID to
yeah, you
Letterboxd,
did.
like, probably 2021, I think I switched to
Somewhere around
Letterboxd,
then.
which means, yeah, we definitely watched this in 2020 then.
Yeah, we did.
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, figured I'd throw the anecdote in at the end. I appreciate being on.
Yeah, no, glad to have you, and okay, well, thank you all for listening to the podcast today. Please come and find us on social media if you have any thoughts you wanna share with us, but otherwise, have a good day, everybody.
Bye, y'all.